The teenager reportedly was part of a satanic cult, the Knights of the Black Circle.
Oh, the Knights of the Black Circle, Satan cult. Tom swallows his L's.
Ricky and the Knights? No.
It was the initial police report that had the errors about a satanic cult and all this other stuff that was, of course, withdrawn and then replaced with a more accurate police report. But of course, by then it was too late and the media had picked up on that. And of course, they love a good scandal. And so it kind of, went on from there.
And there was a lot of sensationalism. They were really, I think, cashing in on the satanic angle, which I don't think this ever really was about.
This is a story about trauma and disconnection. That doesn't sell newspapers.
And to me, that does a really big disservice to the victims and the story in general.
But there was nothing cult-like or satanic about that group, and the press just got it all wrong. They weren't even involved with Ricky.
Oh yeah, the death cult. You have to stop them and say, no, I knew them. That's not true. And sometimes people listen and sometimes they don't.
I missed the initial blush of that. I understand there were people, born-agains, flooding downtown, preaching Northport was an evil town, just because some stupid cop stated off the cuff that this was a satanic ritual. It was a murder between, a couple of dust heads who were kids, and not to minimize it or minimize them. They were kids, they were human beings, but that set off a firestorm that I was happy to have missed because I don't like talking to evangelicals unless they're family.
It all kind of got conflated, and it became this very compelling story of cult murder in a beautiful North Shore town on Long Island. The only catch was it didn't happen that way. The Knights were not a satanic group. They were a group of kids. So the press just got it all wrong. And still to this day, those rumors linger.
It was my first introduction to the way the press really does operate. Don't get me wrong, I'm not a press basher, but I was completely unaware that they would just make shit up. It was disconcerting because you had this avalanche of bullshit, and you sit there and you're like, wait a minute, I live here. None of this is going on.
Look, the photo of Ricky at his arraignment was iconic.
The classic photo, it's up there with Manson's crazy photo that was on Life magazine.
That face, he looks like he's possessed.
Definitely went out of his way to be creepy.
Yeah, and that one, he looks like he's crazed, and he stares at the camera, and his eyes are basically bulging out. Like, that's not a good look.
It didn't help matters any.
I think that there were people that seized upon that picture and said, oh, hey, this works for my thing, too.
It's a great photograph, and when you have just a photograph, you can put any kind of importance on it, any kind of emphasis on it, and he seems wild.
The paparazzi gets it, and suddenly that defines the human being. Is this, crazy shit,
That's the picture that just went around, the world. People saw that, thought that that's the way he was. That's like he was walking around with that face, like that he was that deranged. And yeah, it terrified people.
He had his ACDC t-shirt. He had that demonic look in his eyes.
Not only has it got ACDC on it, it's got a picture of the devil's face right on it.
Well, I'm sure Ricky, well, maybe not. I don't know if he would have, what wardrobe he would have chose, knowing that was going to be his history.
Other symbols of Satan are the letters ACDC, which stand for Antichrist, Devil Child.
ACDC are a blood cult.
That shit's all hokey. That shit's all made up. It doesn't exist anyway. That shit's all fairy tale shit.
Yeah, they get vilified, these bands, but I tell you what, their sales went up.
That became currency inside the kid world. People having these records hidden under their mattresses, or tapes inside, cassette tapes inside different cassette boxes to hide this stuff. And so people were fascinated, kids were fascinated by this idea of a satanic murderer. Finally, Satan was good for something.
It's easy to blame heavy metal because it's dark and it's evil, on the surface, but it's not.
Art is art, and whether it's rock and roll or film or whatever, we're just artists, man. We're trying to entertain people. And to lay that kind of shit on an artist, unjustified.
I think we became more outcasts if you listen to metal.
Yeah, you got shit, you know. I mean, at least in Saugus where I grew up, it wasn't, you know, there weren't very many kids in Metallica or Misfits shirts.
Music has been a punching bag for the generations of parents for a long time.
Like when all this broke, all the news, I had a big Highway to Hell poster, like Black Velvet poster in my room. I was like, whoop, time for that to come down. I think I still have that somewhere.
And I remember my mother coming in with the newspaper with him on the cover.
And my mother came out onto the porch. She had a newspaper in her hand and she had a nightgown on still.
My mother came in just screaming with this, and she just tore down all my heavy metal posters.
And she said, do you know any of these boys? Do you know these boys? You know, where were you? Where were you? And I was like, no, I was just down, we were listening to Van Halen, you know.
It was just saying, like, this is what you're gonna, you know, you keep following this music, this is what you're gonna become.
And she opened up the paper and it was a picture of Kasso's face. And he's wearing an ACDC shirt and she's freaking out.
You know, you're gonna become just like him, you know, a murderer.
It was as though the devil was an actual entity hanging out at the 7-Eleven on the corner, hanging out in some kids' rooms.
Parents and teachers and stuff, they all wanted to find the rest of the devil worshippers. You know, where are the rest of the Satanists in town? One was hiding in our midst, and, you know, we have to smoke them out.
Made, you know, everybody think about, you know, what's really going on in our towns, and yeah, it started a lot of, you know, the satanic panic, and there's Dungeons and Dragons and Ozzy's. This is what's causing everybody to go crazy and become violent and satanic.
So it was like I had my little tape case full of ACDC and Iron Maiden and stuff, and I wasn't a Satan worshiper, but it was like an indicator for them, for the parents and authority figures, you know, coaches and clergy or whoever.
I remember driving in a car with my aunt who was explaining very carefully to me that, of course music is satanic, and of course there's messages in the backwards that will hypnotize you. And even forwards is terrible. And that is why we can't play the radio in the car.
And I remember for many, many months after that, even years, that conversation was hair triggered, you know. You're not one of them devil kids, are you? You know, it would just come up. It would come up everywhere all the time.
And it became just a way to criticize music, criticize youth culture, criticize fantasy, criticize long hair. Certainly my friends who had longer hair were treated very roughly by the police for years after the fact. I graduated in 1989. So 5 years after Ricky Kasso, and still every long hair in Port Jefferson was known to the police for no other reason than they had long hair and would be visited by the police to make sure they weren't engaging in satanic murder when they were smoking cigarettes behind the school gym.
I wasn't sophisticated enough at 10 years old to know that I was responding to the whiff of hypocrisy, you know, but it was there.
Sort of imagine if the Salem witch trials weren't about young girls, but instead about the adults attacking the young children for being Satanists.
The reaction to it and the way the case blew up is the perfect storm. It was waiting to happen. They were looking for somebody.
There was a larger movement at that time of people being overly concerned about music the kids were listening to.
That was the golden age of Satan. I mean, you had made-for-TV films about Satan and possession, and then The Exorcist. And it was devil, 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 right? Well, shit, that's gonna pay off when everybody tries to straighten their tie and become a yuppie in the 80s. They're like, what about all this Satan shit? We gotta clear this up, you know? It's all made up anyway. It's all bullshit.
You know, it like happened at that perfect time in like the Republican 80s, you know, the Reagan era, you know.
These kids are showing up, so it was an easy scapegoat, and suburban kids are always going to be bored and looking for ways to act out.
No, I mean, the 80s were fucking stupid, man, because, you know, the Tipper Gore hearings.
The PMRC, the Parents Music Research Center or something like that.
With Frank Zappa, Dee Snider,
and John Denver.
One of the greatest things I ever saw was a senator reading verbatim the Mentors fucking lyrics going, smell my anal vapor.
Your face is my toilet paper. On your face, I leave a shit tower, golden showers.
I'm sorry, your time has expired.
I mean, dude, get the fuck out of here. It was never better. You're sitting there with a bong watching TV and that shit's on there. Dude. I miss the 80s, kind of.
Parents were livid. Parents were terrified. So if you played Dungeons & Dragons or listened to even music on the radio, you were a suspected Satanist.
Well, that was just sugar for the ants. I mean, that made kids buy the shit, you know. I mean, I don't know what they were thinking, but yeah, they really did try and fucking like governmentally whip kids into line. And Ricky was a poster boy.
That whole experience, the odd thing that I got out of it was, oh my God, like the media really is sort of amazingly biased here, that they took this story that does have that dark edge to it and a dark side to it in that story, but it's not the whole story, and it's not a town where evil dwells.